Sales of small trucks have recently reached record highs in Korea. What is the economic significance of increased sales of small trucks closely related to the lives of common people? A sense of crisis is spreading in the Korean economy recently amid depressed domestic demand. Are there any fundamental and long-term measures to revive domestic demand? Maglev trains using magnetic levitation are slated to be commercialized soon. What is the core technology of Korea's Maglev train, commercialized for the second time in the world? We can turn on and off the TV with simple hand gestures without a remote control. Let's meet the next generation gesture recognition technology. Recently, Western photographers are releasing collections of photos on North Korea one after another. What is the image of North Korea seen through their eyes and camera lenses?
Hello, I'm Andrew Salmon and welcome to Bizline. Now, small trucks are a common sight on Korean roads, and for good reason. These little giants are the preferred transport option for thousands of small businesses nationwide. And recently, sales in this vehicle segment have been surging. What does this trend tell us about the overall state of the macroeconomy? Well, keep watching.
People say the best-selling vehicle tends to reflect the state of the economy. In Korea, sales of small trucks are rising fast. So does this mean that the economy is on the way to recovery? Let's find out what the rising popularity of small trucks means. People who are self-employed and in small businesses mostly buy small trucks. A small truck is between half a ton to 1 ton and used to move small freight. Self-employed in the business of small freight transportation are opting to buy small trucks. Mr. Na Yong-soo bought a pickup truck 4 years ago and started small freight delivery service.
오늘은 간단한 이사짐 조그만 건 좀 옮겨달라고 해서 지금 가는 중입니다.
Small trucks have many uses in freight service, from assisting moving for one-person households, small furniture, to home appliances. Mr. Na was able to create a job for himself through the truck.
용달 같은 경우는 크게 무리한 짐 안 싣고 간단한 짐 같은 거는 나르고 도와주고 싣고 할 수가 있거든요. 그래서 이제 큰 돈 없이도 1톤 영업용 용달 한 대 가지면은 운수차라든지 이제 이 나이에도 할 수 있기 때문에 지금 하고 있습니다.
A used car sales lot in Seoul. Small trucks are in demand and rare to find these days. Customers are continuously looking for small trucks for purchase. This man is here to purchase a 1-ton pickup truck for himself today.
오늘 제가 차를 1톤 트럭을 배달 용도로 사용을 하려고 식품 배달 창업을 하려고 하는데요. 차를 한번 보러 왔습니다.
Due to its popularity, people have to wait about 3 months to receive a brand new 1-ton pickup truck. Porter 1-ton pickup truck manufactured by Hyundai Motor sold 24,514 units in the first quarter of this year, which is an 11.9% increase from the same period a year earlier. In March, Porter became the #1 selling vehicle, surpassing sedans and compact cars. A 1-ton pickup truck is mostly used for freight service or owned by self-employed people. Rise in its sales indicates that there is also a rise in people in such businesses.
최근에 1톤 트럭 수요의 증가 원인은 경기 회복에 대한 기대감과 함께 이 고령자의 취업 그리고 또 청년층의 실업 문제가 심화되면서 생계형 장사를 위한 목적에서 이 구매가 증가하고 있다고 봅니다.
There are many explanations on the reason for the rise in sales of 1-ton pickup trucks. Last year, there was a rise in number of people taking early retirement. Rise in the number of retirees on top of unemployed youths brought high interest in entrepreneurship. A new Hyundai Porter 1-ton truck cost around $20,000, while a used pickup cost about $10,000. It costs less than renting a store and financially less of a burden in starting a new business.
예전 같은 경우에는 이제 30대 후반, 40대 이제 시골에 계신 분, 농부라든지 뭐 이런 분들 운행하셨는데 지금은 이제 젊은 층들이 이제 자기만의 이제 사업을 하기 위해서 이제 의류 장사라든지 뭐 간단한 패스트푸드를 장사를 하기 위해서 이제 요새 화물차 같은 거 개조해서 운행하시려고 이제 많이 오시는 편입니다.
Along with the Korean government's campaign on deregulation, renovating trucks as snack bars will be legalized, which has added to the popularity of small pickups. The government announced to legalize truck renovation for food sales to create jobs and help people make a living. A company that renovates small trucks as food trucks has been receiving many inquiries since the government announcement. There are new business ideas using the small truck.
작년 대비 한 20%에서 30% 정도 증가를 했고요. 그리고 이제 품목 같은 경우는 커피, 아이스크림, 그다음에 일반 이제 스낵 종류가 작년보다는 좀 그런 간편한 음식 종류로 많이 지금 증가를 하고 있어요.
A park in Gyeonggi-do. Mr. Lee Tae-sup is preparing to open for business. He sells ice cream on his truck. Mr. Yi used to be an office worker, and it has only been a month since he opened his ice cream truck. He is still learning traits of his business. The first thing he did after deciding to start his own business was buy a truck. He went along with the idea because it required little capital.
일단 일반 상가들처럼 자리가 한정돼서 하는 게 아니라 목 좋은 자리가 있으면 옮겨 다닐 수도 있고 그때그때 계절에 맞는 음식을 장사할 수도 있고 그런 부분이 좋은 것 같습니다.
The Korean government assessed that the rise in sales of small trucks is a good indication of economic recovery. Rise in freight deliveries can have a good effect on the economy. Experts also hope that small trucks can help resuscitate the local economy.
최근 정부의 규제 완화와 함께 1톤 트럭의 수요가 증가하고 있는데 정부의 규제 완화로 인해서 푸드트럭이나 또 다양한 형태의 택배 그리고 용달 형태도 지금 나타나고 있습니다. 앞으로 소비자들이 이 1톤 트럭을 개조해서 다양한 용도로 활용할 경우에는 이 자동차 업체의 투자가 확 증가할 뿐 아니라 또한 이 1톤 트럭의 활용도가 늘어나면서 경기 회복에도 기여할 것으로 봅니다.
Small trucks, which are also known as the trucks of sustenance for the working people in Korea, is giving some positive indication that the economy is on a right track to recovery.
Korea's economy won a triple crown last year. Trade volumes surpassed $1 trillion, trade surpluses and export volumes all hit record highs. But the long slump in domestic demand continues, meaning Korea's economy is continually exposed and indeed slave to the global economy. Is there a way forward? Well, to answer this very significant and very large question, we have an expert from the elite Seoul National University. He's an expert in finance and economics. It's Lee Phil-sang. Welcome to Bizline.
Thank you for having me.
Please don't mention it. Now, let's kick off with some figures. In terms of Korea's overall GDP, its overall economy, what percentage is international trade related? What percentage is domestic demand driven?
Well, before giving you some figure, let me tell you this. You said we have a triple crown, but I think we have a triple problem too.
Okay.
Which means that we got huge household debt,
Yes.
unemployment,
Yeah.
and housing market crash.
Yeah.
So triple crown is not necessarily a good news.
It's not the full story. Okay.
The main concern of Korean economy is the imbalance between the foreign sector and domestic sector.
Yeah.
Obviously, the foreign sector is too much dominant. If you look at the export figures, in 2005,
Yeah.
it was about 28% of GDP.
28%.
Yeah, but in 2013, it went up to 54% of GDP, almost
Steep
doubled
climb. Yeah.
in 8 years.
So the gap is widening.
Yes, but in the meantime, if you look at the domestic consumption, in 2005, it was about 55% of GDP. In 2013, it went down to 50% of GDP. So this is why we have a triple problem along with triple crown.
I remember when I first came to Korea, Koreans were very, very heavy savers. Then we had the credit crisis and the credit card crisis in, I think, around 2002.
Yeah.
And Korea's changed almost overnight from net creditors to net debtors. That was, correct me if I'm wrong, the beginning of this issue that has been the suppression of domestic demand. What are the other factors that have contributed to this?
Yeah, the credit crisis in
Yeah.
2002 was a harsh blow to the domestic demand. But it's not the fundamental reason.
Okay.
The fundamental reason was that the economy lost its ability to create jobs. After 1997 crisis, so-called IMF crisis, the Korean economy had to undertake a restructuring. Unfortunately, the restructuring was centered around big companies. As a result, the economy was put in the hands of big companies.
Yeah.
Problem is that the big companies automated and computerized the production process to increase productivity and profitability. That means many workers were kicked out of their jobs. So naturally, unemployment increased and credit crisis escalated and domestic demand fell. So
let's just follow up that thought. Historically, again, Korea did benefit from the significant trickle-down effect. When the big companies did well, they sold a lot of products overseas, and this trickled down throughout the economy and enriched pretty much everybody. But as you've mentioned in the figures you just quoted us, we're now seeing a deshackling between the domestic economy and the international trade-driven companies. Why have we seen this such a significant delinkage? Why is the trickle-down effect just dried up?
we don't have a trickle down anymore now.
Yeah, right.
Instead, we have pumping up. If you look at the relationship between the big companies and small companies, it's vertical.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost a master and servant relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
So if the small companies make profits, the big companies take the major portion of the profits. Usually, the big companies give work to do to the small companies. If they make profits, they just take it. And whenever they face cost hike, they transfer to the small companies by compelling them to reduce their production costs like wages. So this kind of unfair structure dried up the trickle-down procedure here.
Has gone. Another factor, of course, for the major companies, you mentioned unemployment, is the amount of Korean companies who are offshoring. They're no longer manufacturing strictly in Korea. They've got manufacturing bases in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere in Asia. How significant a problem is this in terms of the failure of the economy to generate local jobs?
Industry in Korea is changing from the conventional manufacturing into high tech, like the semiconductor, mobile phone, and knowledge-based services, etc. But the big companies kind of occupied the whole industry, and they automated, they used machines, and they kicked the workers out. So in terms of generating employment, I mean, we don't have any ability. It no longer works. So instead, we must develop other industries like the services and domestic the market, etc. But it's still, fall behind. And the small companies must do something about it, but the small companies cannot do anything because of the big companies
that suppressed,
pressing down.
Okay. Yeah, it's a perennial problem. Let's move away from the major companies to the households. What would you consider to be the main factors weighing down on households? Is this mortgage repayments? Is it the crash in the housing market? What are the big issues for the average Kim Park-Ol Lee in his monthly outlay?
Well, there are three main factors that are depressing the domestic demand. First one is the unemployment. The employment rate in Korea is about 60%. It's relatively low, especially
compared to Western Europe.
Yes, especially the young people. They don't have jobs. The second factor is the slump in real estate market. In Korea, about 80% of household wealth is held in real estate market.
That's still the major household asset, is
Yes,
it? They're literally the bricks and mortar, the house.
Yeah, still, I mean, the slump of real estate market. I mean, the people cannot mobilize cash for spending money.
It's locked up in the house.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's locked up there, and the price is going down. So those two are the major factors that discouraging the domestic demand.
Got you. But I mean, talking about household debt, I mean, particularly looking around Seoul and other big cities, and Korea now is very much an urbanized country. Was there not massive inflation in house prices? Have they not now slumped to a more reasonable level, which means that they're not going to rise again, are they?
I think it is almost a crash. I mean, before, the price of real estate is steadily increasing, and that made people richer and richer, and they try to work hard to save money and buy the houses, etc. But now it is gone. So now the people have too much household debt. It's now 1,000 trillion won, and that is about 60 million won per household.
Per household in Korea.
And the prices are going down, and the trades are not active at all, and they cannot sell it, and they're just forced to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
That's really a problem.
Let's move on. There's another issue, of course, and that is that Korea now is almost, looking around, the infrastructure is finished. I think the construction boom is over because the population starts to fall in, I think, 2015, 2016. There's already a surplus of office space in many of the major cities. So that suggests to me that the traditional locomotive of domestic demand, which was construction, no longer has an outlet. And of course, the other issue is social overhead capital. The country's infrastructure is very, very good, but it's already in place. So has this traditional booster of the domestic economy, the construction and SOE sector, basically evaporated?
Well, it's not finished yet. I mean, the buildings in Korea are old enough. Some apartments are 30 years old, 40 years old. So the many rebuilding projects are underway. Another thing is that industry is changing in Korea from manufacturing to services, etc. So the old factories are disappearing, but new high-rise buildings are under construction to accommodate venture companies, restaurants, shopping malls, offices, etc. So there's a new demand for construction. But now the real estate market is in slump, so it's not working at this moment. But if the real estate market is vitalized, we have still some potential for SOC to do something about the economic growth.
Well, I mean, let's pick up on that last thought. I mean, is there anything that government or industry can indeed do to boost this dormant, or as you say, this crashed real estate market?
Most difficult problem is the household debt. They have too much debt, so they cannot buy the houses.
Right.
So that's why the housing market is falling down. So for the government, they have to lower the interest rate to reduce the burden. And in addition to that, they also have to prolong the lending period of loans. In Korea, banks are extending short-term loans at high interest rate to make money, but it's difficult for the borrowers to pay in time. So they have to cut the interest rate, plus they have to prolong the period
of repayment.
So if they reduce the burden of debt, I mean, the people will try to buy the houses, and that will be momentum for the real estate market to boost again. Another policy that government should pursue is creating jobs. If people have jobs, they make money.
They can spend,
Sure, and they will definitely buy the houses, and it will encourage the market.
Okay, so job creation is critical. Let's move on to another, an external example. There's a lot of talk in Korea now of Japan's lost 20 years, the two lost decades, and a large part of that was just very, very slow, low growth, again, for a very similar problem. Do you see Korea facing a similar problem?
Well, we have three things in common between Japan and Korea. The first one is we have the bubble in real estate market, and appreciation of domestic currency, and the aging society. So those three factors. If we consider that, many people speculate that Korea may face the similar problem that Japan had. But at the same time, we have three different things. First of all, we have different industries. In Korea, we have kind of a sun-rising type industry like IT and knowledge-based service, etc. But Japan, they have just a sun-setting industry like conventional manufacturing. So we have different industries. Another one is we have different people. The Japanese people, they study in Japan and just work in Japan.
Yeah.
But Korean people study in and out of Korea,
right.
and they work internationally. So in terms of international competitiveness, our workers is higher. And the third factor is that we have different government policy. Korean government emphasize restructuring through deregulation and innovation. But Japanese government is emphasizing temporary boosting through money printing and devaluation of yen. So at this moment, I think we have two things to do. First one is we have to increase R&D to develop future industries. The second thing is we have to vitalize small companies to restore the ability of job creation plus balanced growth. So if we do those two things successfully, my guess is that Korean economy may surpass Japan, let's say in 5 years, at least within 10 years.
I mean, in some ways, it looks almost like a good problem to have, having these very, very well-beating industries and this very, very close integration with the global economy. But what vulnerabilities is Korea exposed to? I'm thinking of in terms of, is the currency and are the financial markets and stock markets overly exposed to international investment patterns and the peaks and troughs of the overall global economy?
So one of the problems with Korean economy is the imbalance between the financial sector and real sector. In real sector, by the big companies, we are continuing growth.
Sure.
But in financial sector, we are so fragile, we are so obsolescent. So if foreign capital comes in, they can do everything here. So they make huge profits and they run away. So that kind of fragility, it is incurring a frequent financial crisis in Korea. So the most significant financial crisis was 1997 Irish crisis. Another one is 2008, the financial crisis and so on. So how hard the Korean people may work in this country, I mean, if foreign capital comes in and take away the profits, we have nothing. Sometimes we are just ridden with huge debt, etc. So the imbalance between the finance sector and the real sector must be closed up and up.
So some very, very significant imbalances across the economy.
That's right.
And how they're going to work out remains to be seen. Dr. Lee, thank you very much for giving us some significant insight in that.
Pleasure.
You can produce a video without a special skill or craftsmanship? The app of the week is video editing application Snap Movie. First, you choose the subject to film and select the shooting time per scene. The maximum time of the video that can be made free of charge is 24 seconds. When you select the shooting time per scene as 2 seconds, you can film a total of 12 scenes. You can change the mood by applying filters and overlays to the shooting images, or pick a background music that suits the images. When you play the created video, a music video is completed. Now you can keep the moments you want to remember with your own video.
Starting from next month, a new form of public transport, one that can literally levitate, will begin commercial services. The world's second and Korea's first urban magnetic levitation train begins commercial operations at Incheon International Airport. Now, Maglev trains use magnetic force to lift them off the tracks and then thrust them down it. And this makes them smoother, quieter, and more energy efficient than conventional trains. So, let's take a closer look at this futuristic form of public transport.
Urban maglev train, which uses magnetic levitation to propel vehicle rather than running on track on wheels, is scheduled for a full operation for the first time in Korea, which is the world's second. Korea's next-generation rail transportation developed by homemade components and technology. Safe and clean way of commuting is about to begin. The Incheon International Airport, where 170,000 planes make a stop annually, will soon have a new addition and means of transportation. The Maglev train, which runs 6.1 kilometers through Incheon International Airport to Yongju Station at up to 85 kilometers per hour, is called Ecobee, and it will be in operation very soon. The Maglev train became of high interest in the 1970s in Germany. Korea's Ecobee is the world's second low to mid-speed maglev train in commercial operation in urban area following Japan. The Korea Institute of Machinery and Materials has been working on the maglev train for 25 years since 1989, and the commercial operation of Ecobee is in near sight. The vehicle stays afloat and moves 8 millimeters above the rails. Even without passengers on board, the vehicle itself weighs 19 tons. So how is it possible to keep such a heavy metal float in motion?
자기부상 열차는 일반 철도와는 달리 바퀴 없이 전자석의 힘으로 차를 띄워서 가는 것인데, 전자석은 이제 차량에 부착되어 가지고 레일 밑에서 이렇게 전자석이 있습니다. 그래서 레일과 이 차량 전자석이 서로 잡아 당기는 힘에 의해서 차가 들어 올려지게 되고, 실제로 부상하는 높이는 8mm입니다. 그래서 8mm를 어떤 경우에든지 바람이 불으나 사람이 작게 타나 많이 타나 이걸 적절하게 유지해 주는 게 기술적으로 가장 관건이 될 것이고.
That is due to electromagnets that are placed at the bottom of the vehicle and on the rails. When current flows into the electromagnets above the track, the opposite poles of the magnet move into formation and create a push and pull effect, making the train move forward. So what are the merits of maglev train over regular train with wheels?
자기당 열차가 친환경적인 시스템인데요. 소음, 진동, 그다음에 분진이 거의 없는 시스템입니다. 그 중에서 특히 이제 소음, 진동이 별로 없기 때문에 아주 조용하기 때문에 이 자기당 열차는 주거 지역에 굉장히 인접해서 이렇게 운영을 할 수가 있습니다.
Noise level is also at minimum within the vehicle as well. Measurement of noise inside the vehicle recorded 65 decibels, which is lower than 71 to 85 decibels recorded in a regular train. As maglev trains stay afloat, vibration is also at a minimum and there is less chance of a derailment. Moreover, there is no worry over dust, which makes it a green way of public transportation. Maglev trains are also in demand because it is known to be economical. In the past, it was considered costly to keep the vehicle afloat, as such a method consumed 20 to 30% more electricity.
저희가 아직 운영을 못 해봤기 때문에 얼마다 하고 이렇게 숫자를 저희가 제시를 할 수는 없습니다만은 단점으로 제시되어 있는 것은 전기료가 조금 더 비쌀 수 있다는 겁니다. 그런데 전기료는 도시철도 운영비의 1년 운영비의 5에서 10% 정도 수준이라고 합니다.
Construction cost of urban-type maglev trains is estimated to be below $45 million per kilometer, which is lower than the cost for a light rail or underground. Operating expenses is also lower because there are no wheels or gears to replace, making maglev trains highly economical.
자기당 열차는 아시는 바와 같이 떠서 이렇게 가니까 마찰되고 마모되고 그런 부품이 없습니다. 그런 유지 보수에서 들어가는 그 경제적인 측면이 아주 우월합니다. 대전도시철도공사에서 현재 운영하고 있는 1호선 차량하고 비교를 했을 때 유지 보수비, 운영비가 자기부상 열차가 한 40%는 더 저렴하지 않을까 이렇게 예측하고 있고요. 그래서 경제성 측면에서
장기간으로 볼 때 저희는 라이프 사이클 코스트라 그러는데 장기간 생애 주기 비용을 보면 훨씬 더 우위에 있다고 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있습니다.
The world's second urban maglev train, Ecobee, it still needs to prove itself to be safe. For 2 years since 2009, the Korea Institute of Machinery and Materials conducted the toughest performance test and is ready to have passengers on board.
선로의 경우는 지진을 대비해서 강도를 충분히 확보하고 있고 차량의 경우는 열차가 선로를 감싸도록 구조를 만들어서 탈선의 염려를 미연에 방지하고 있습니다.
The urban-type maglev train is also planned for construction in Daejeon Metropolitan City by the year 2020. With the rise of global interest on maglev trains, Korea's own technology is expected to make a noticeable headway.
실제로 시범 노선을 구축해가지고 인천공항에서 시범적으로 영업 운행을 하게 된다면 그 다음에는 우리 이제 국내 지자체, 지금 예를 들면 대전시 도시철도 2호선에 자기부상 열차를 하기로 정해져 있고 지금 우리가 러시아라든지 인도네시아, 인도 이런 쪽으로 활발하게 상담을 하고 있습니다만 일단 이 우리나라에서 이제 상용화가 시작된다면 이걸 기반으로 해외 시장에 활발하게 진출할 수 있는 그런 어떤 기회를 많이 가질 것으로 기대를 합니다.
Ecobee, maglev train made with Korea's own technology, is scheduled for full operation after 60 days of a test run. It won't be long before Korean-made maglev trains running on tracks built in other countries around the globe will be seen.
It may just be the world's greatest ever invention for couch potatoes. The TV remote control enables you to turn your TV on, turn it off, change the volume, change the channels without even having to stand up. And now things may be moving even further. In the very near future, you'll be able to turn me off or change channels on me without a remote control, but just by using hand gestures. Is it magic? Is it technology? Let's take a look.
Gesture recognition technology is already commercialized in our daily lives. We control unmanned aircraft, better known as drones, enjoy playing games without joystick, and control PCs without touching a keyboard. Like this, gesture recognition technologies that control smart devices without input units are being introduced one after another, drawing attention as a more convenient and natural user interface. Remote control is the most popular input device in our lives, but in the not-too-distant future, it may disappear from our homes. When you sit in front of a TV, put your hand in the air, and make a light click gesture, the TV menu is turned on. When you point a video with a finger and make a click gesture, the TV immediately plays the video. Its core technology is the gesture recognition sensors installed at the TV. They recognize the locations of the user's eyes and fingertip. The sensors find the point connecting the two locations in straight lines and send signals there.
All the traditional gesture controllers, they are mouse type indirect control, which means they need to have a cursor on the screen, and to click a certain point, the user have to wave their hands to locate cursor on the screen. But since V-Touch is touch based, there's no preparation time nor any delay for clicking. You can just see, watch, and then just point, then click happens. So it's much easier and much more intuitive than those traditional controllers.
This remote touch control technology, developed by a Korean startup, touts an accuracy that can replace the remote control. Without having to authenticate users individually, it recognizes movements when several people take turns to make gestures. This doesn't only apply to TVs. We can turn on or off the light by pointing the light and making a click gesture. We can control presentations with a hand instead of a pointer and play music from a digital signage outside a building.
We believe that the first market that we are targeting is smart TV market. And as I showed earlier, with those one single camera on smart TV, we can potentially control all the appliances in the living room. So the first step will be definitely smart TVs, and then later on we want to move to the smart home as well.
Indeed, the gesture recognition sensor market, including camera sensors like Kinect or accelerometer and geomagnetic sensors, has been growing explosively since 2012, with the industry sales likely to rise to $15 billion in 2018.
유저 인터페이스가 충분히 뒷받침을 해준다면 그런 터치까지도 대체할 수 있는 굉장히 편리하고 또는 어떤 사용자의 어떤 본능에 가까운 그런 기술이기 때문에 굉장히 그 잠재력 있는 기술로 지금 각광을 받을 수가 있겠습니다.
As commercialization of wearable devices began, the gesture recognition technology market expanded further. In fact, following Google's takeover of PC-use gesture recognition company Flutter last year, Apple has also recently acquired PrimeSense, a startup that owns a 3D gesture recognition sensor technology.
웨어러블의 속성상 액세서리까지로도 그 형태가 많이 경량화, 소형화 되고 있는 추세인데 그 경량화, 소형화 트렌드에 따라서 지금 웨어러블이 갖고 있는 제한점이 무엇이냐면 바로 화면, 디스플레이가 점점 작아진다거나 실제로는 없어지는 그런 웨어러블도 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 화면이 없어서 터치 인터페이스를 쓸 수 없는 경우에는 동작 인식이 필요할 수밖에 없는 상황입니다.
Indeed, a team of Korean researchers has developed a technology that can control smart devices with simple hand gestures when the user wears a wrist-type wearable device. When you wear the smart band, clench your fist and move your hand up and down. The selected screen moves. When you clench your fist, it is turned on. When you unclench your fist, it is turned off.
사람의 손의 움직임에 착안을 했습니다. 실은 많은 제스처 기술들이 언제가 제스처의 시작인지 끝인지 아는 기술이 굉장히 중요하겠는데요. 저희들이 제시하는 기술은 바로 이 제스처의 시작과 끝을 알리는 기술입니다. 이 손을 쥐고 펼 때에 이 손목 근육의 움직임을 검출을 해서 이것을 알아내는 그런 방법입니다. 그래서 이 손목의 근육의 변화가 일어나는 이 부분에 적외선 광을 쏘아주고 그리고 돌아오는 신호를 저희들이 분석을 해서 이것을 인식하는 기술을 개발을 했습니다.
The existing gesture recognition technologies are mostly based on camera sensors. Therefore, movements are recognized only when the user faces toward the camera. But wearable gesture technology can be used freely at any time and anywhere, as users can walk around wearing the devices like smart bands on their arms and communicate with the smart devices in the surroundings. The technology is very useful as it can be immediately applied to existing smartwatches or bands without having to separately produce new smartwatches or bands.
이 기술은 실은 다양한 곳에 적용을 할 수가 있겠는데 저희들이 아까 이런 기술의 원리 때문에 당장은 스마트 밴드나 스마트 워치와 같은 이러한 제품에 이용을 한다면 아까 말씀드린 웨어러블 장치 또는 스마트 기기의 입력수단으로서 유용하게 사용할 것으로 보고 있습니다.
Moreover, some are even unveiling gesture recognition technology applied rings that are lighter than wristbands. On top of recognizing basic gestures, when the user wears the ring and makes a gesture writing letters in the air, the ring identifies the letters and composes a text message. Like so, the technology can naturally control devices without separate input units, bringing forward the era of Internet of Things where people and objects can more easily communicate with each other.
단순히 어떤 온오프 기능이라든지 그런 제어 명령 기능뿐만 아니라 그 사물이 어떤 사용자가 내린 명령에 대해서 굉장히 인터랙티브한 또는 지능적인, 인텔리전트한 그런 대답을 할 수 있는 수준까지도 된다면 동작 인식이 굉장히 자연스러워지고 또 오히려 더 선호하는 그런 기술이 될 수 있겠죠.
Once the gesture recognition technology can implement even immediate interactions between devices, it could become a next-generation control technology that can replace the touch input method in a not-too-distant future.
What is secret tends to be fascinating, and North Korea is arguably the most secretive society on Earth. So to supply the demand for visual information about this secretive state, a number of Western photographers have recently been releasing collections of North Korean photography. So what did these people find to fill their lenses with inside the Hermit Kingdom? Let's hear some testimonies and see some of their work.
People on the subway, all with the same expressionless face. A street with almost no traffic. Girls learning how to play the guitar, a scene that can be seen anywhere in the world. These are an increasing number of photos taken in North Korea by foreign professional photographers as well as tourists that capture the everyday life of North Koreans, not missiles or nuclear facilities.
Ich bin auf die Idee gekommen, Nordkorea zu fotografieren, weil ich in Deutschland aufgewachsen bin und Deutschland, als ich Kind war, auch ein geteiltes Land gewesen ist. Ich konnte immer rüberschauen über die Grenze, durfte aber nie über die Grenze rübergehen und das hat mich sehr neugierig gemacht. Und nachdem dann in Deutschland die Grenze aufgelöst wurde, bin ich nach Korea gefahren, um zu schauen, wie das aussieht in einem Land, wo ein Teil kapitalistisch und ein Teil sozialistisch ist.
It was pure curiosity that led Dieter Liesner to visit the secretive socialist country to take pictures with the approval of the North Korean government in 2006. The German architecture photographer later published a photo essay, Korea, Korea, that brings readers the stark contrast images of North and South Korea after visiting Seoul in 2012. In his pictures, the streets and people in Pyongyang look not only less developed than ones in Seoul, but also duller and gloomier.
Die Stadt sehen vom Hotel aus und es war sehr leer und sehr ruhig. Es gab keine Autos, nachts war kein Licht, es war einfach dunkel, es gab keinen Strom und es war sehr ruhig, weil auch keine Autos fuhren und es gab keine Werbung in der Stadt.
Liesner's pictures give the impression largely described by major news outlets as a reclusive and repressive socialist country, but certainly captures views of North Korea that could not be seen in general news before. Dieter is not only the only one who has captured rare views of North Korea society recently. Empty roads, statues and propaganda posters, somewhat outmoded scenes with old-time carts and East European trams. These are pictures taken by Swedish photographer Bjorn Bergman. Also, a Singaporean freelance photographer has lately been making headlines with his photo project called DPRK 360, which allows people to have a peek of the Hermit Kingdom.
지금에 나오는 그런 사진 작가들을 통해서 나오는 북한의 모습들은 비교적 있는 그대로의 모습을 보여준다는 데 있어서 과거의 언론이 바라봤던 북한의 시각하고는 좀 차이가 있지 않나 이런 생각입니다. 예. 있는 그대로를 비교적 보여준다 이렇게 볼 수가 있겠죠.
But at the same time, North Korean defectors argue that these images fail to show all sides of the country because they were taken under the approval of the North Korean government.
북한 당국이 어떤 그 정말 강력하게 제한하는 규제를 완화함에도 불구하고 강력하게 제한하는 어떤 특정 시설이라든가 어떤 그런 아주 정말 어려운 사람들의 생활 뭐 이런 것들은 아직까지는 좀 사진에 담아내기 어렵지 않나 이런 생각입니다.
Liesner also recalls how North Korean government minders accompanied him everywhere.
Es war ständig ein Mensch vom Sicherheitsdienst neben mir und der hat immer dann die Kamera heruntergedrückt, wenn er meinte, ich würde etwas Falsches fotografieren. Es waren eigentlich nur Denkmäler erlaubt, alles andere nicht.
But such restrictions have not made foreign photographers and tourists to shun their visits to the reclusive North Korea, and the North Korean regime seems to be welcoming their visits more than before. The North Korean leadership is suspected to have been allowing these pictures to be taken to help improve the country's negative image.
북한으로서는 나름대로 효과를 얻는다고 볼 수 있습니다. 왜냐하면 기존의 나쁜 인식들을 이번에 뭔가 좀 보여줌으로써 뭐 김정은 시대 들어와서 변화된 모습들을 몇 컷씩 보여주면 밖에서 볼 때 아, 북한도 뭐 크게 다르지는 않구나. 낙후하다는 것은 인정하는 조건에서도 좀 다른 면이 크게 없다. 이런 걸 보여주는 것을 북한은 성과로 인정할 수 있죠.
But it's not an easy task for the Kim dynasty to change its image of an impoverished totalitarian country. A French photographer recently released an e-book, Banned from North Korea, a collection of photos of everyday life that the North Korean minders demanded to be erased. Photographer Eric Laforgue explains the minders didn't like these photos because such images could give viewers negative impression about the country, those that suggested poverty or acts considered disrespectful of the leadership. If Liesner gets another chance to visit North Korea, he wishes he could visit the countryside other than Pyongyang to freely capture diverse facets of everyday life in the country.
Wenn ich wieder nach Nordkorea komme, es war mir leider nicht möglich, aufs Land zu fahren. Ich war nur in der Stadt, nur in der Hauptstadt. Und ich würde auch gerne mal eine Wohnung von Menschen sehen. Also aufgefallen war mir, dass in den zahlreichen Häusern fehlten Fensterscheiben. Und teilweise waren diese Fensterscheiben dann einfach mit Plastikfolie verkleidet oder aber einfach ganz offen. Und da wohnten Menschen drin. Das finde ich sehr erstaunlich. So etwas habe ich auch noch nie gesehen. Und es wird ja auch kalt im Winter.
It is too early to determine whether the North Korean regime has succeeded in promoting the Hermit Kingdom to people in the outside world through images that tourists and professional photographers have captured during their visits. But for sure, it would be faster for the repressive regime to change its image by giving up its nuclear ambition and stopping violations of its citizens' human rights.
And that's all we have time for on Bizline this week. But do join us again next week because the world's greatest sporting event is about to kick off. And it's not just football fans who are looking forward to the beginning of the World Cup. Businessmen are too. In next week's show, we'll be seeing how a range of Korean companies are planning to leverage this monster marketing opportunity in their business plans. So, do join us then, but that's all for now. I'm Andrew Salmon. This was Bizline. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.